Hello again, and welcome to the digital storytelling training. We are now going into part one of the training. Part one is introduction to storytelling. Here, we're going to talk about the story itself, how to create story, what's the meaning of story, why stories are important, right? Why are you using story to implement your project or uh, reach where you want to reach. So it is always good to start, and this is a tip for facilitation. Start with a question. Questions the participants. Ask them what is a story. Mobilize their brain. Let them see what they think is a story, right? And then you take the definition of story from themselves, take it from what they say, gather their words and then things. For example, just go through what is a story and then wait for answers. And then you go on with your presentations. Here is some quotes from the storyteller, Steven Eric Eng. He's a famous storyteller and he goes into storytelling theories as well. He says the story needs to resonate, create a connection, inspire reflection, and build relationships. And you can also read the rest. It's small um, definitions of story, how he see it, right? Uh, and he says a story needs to give the storyteller and the listener an experience of learning something new and open up to the possibility of being changed by the story. Uh, Stories, I mean, we always share stories since ages, since thousands of years. Storytelling was the main tool for education. It was the main tool for connection, for creating social events, for creating social community. Even people were coming around the fire, sitting, talking, telling each other stories from wherever they travel or they go for trade or do whatever. They come and share stories with each other. This is how people connect. People need stories. Stories are for human, like water is for the fish. Stories are in and all around us, but we cannot live without them. As you can see, and you can read the rest here, some stories lift us up and some stories drain us down. What does that mean, and why this being like said this way? You need to think about all the stories that you hear. Some stories comes with a positive effects. Some stories comes with the negative effects. Some stories comes with good narratives, right? That brings people together. And some stories comes with differences, focusing on the negativities and being used for wrong purposes, I would say, and being used to differentiate between people and um, divide and conquer, as they say. And they use a lot of propaganda, which is based on narratives for stories that drain us down. Not necessarily on a social aspect, but also on a very personal level. Some stories that we think it touch us in a negative way, or it makes us feel bad, or it doesn't helps us to get up from bed in the morning, you know? So it drains us down. Stories are around us like the air, literally. We crave stories. People crave stories. People love to sit and listen to stories and even talk and tell their own stories, right? Some stories makes us feel united as we were talking, and some stories separate us from each other. Depends on who is telling the story, what's the purpose of the story, and we will go on, of course, with the next exercises. Then you come to the small exercise where you will ask the participants to remember their favorite story. Make it general. What's your favorite story? Back maybe when you were a kid, or maybe a story that you just heard yesterday. What is your favorite story? Why it is your favorite? Do you think it is a good story or not? This is more like a group discussion. open the floor for a discussion. You can make it all together discussing, or you can divide the group into two and discuss that. Let them discuss with each other. Why it is my favorite story, and why do you think it's a good story? We move on to, and here we dive deeper into the story. What makes a story a good story? When you hear a story, why do you say, "Oh, that was a good story"? And when, or you maybe feel like, "No, that was a horrible story. I couldn't even follow. I fell asleep in the middle of it," or whatever, right? What makes a good story attract your attention and become a good story? Any story in the world, from big movies, Hollywood movies, to a children book story, is based on these four settings or elements of stories: the settings, characters, plot, and conflict. If you take any story, if you take any movie, if you take any book, if you take anything and analyze them into these four categories, you will find that each story is consisted of these four elements: settings, characters, plot, and conflict. So when you go into writing your story, or you want to tell your story, from now on, you need to think about the settings, characters, plot, and conflict. What are those? Let's take a look. What is the settings when we say the setting of story? Well, a good setting helps the audience visualize the place in the story, right? Any story, it happens in a place, and it happens at a certain time, and it happens in a certain year, in a certain weather, in a certain settings. Like the settings is around you. What was the place looking like? What was next to you? I don't know where you was. What was the time? Who was with you? All these kind of stuff. It makes a setting for the story. It makes a base. Okay, I understand where is your story going. Um Details of the settings can be described, like the time of the day, time of year, time in a history, scenery, the weather, the location. It helps to set the tone or the mood of the story itself. How you can actually, this is actually a tips on how to use your five senses into creating your setting for the story. When you are writing story, think about when you were there. What did you hear? What did you smell? What did you touch? What did you see? What did you taste? How was it? Because this gives the audience or the listener more experience and more visualizing your story. It will make the audience to start creating images in their mind somehow about your story, and thereby they will connect, they will think it is a good story. Let's see an exercise or an example. Look at this picture. If I tell you right now and compare the two scenarios, right? The castle was beside the water. Quite boring. But if you say the waves crashed loudly against the shoreline, the fog lifted lightly, and the medieval castle came into view, it was a beautiful sight. The fog brushed my face, and I could smell the smoke from the fire in the distance and tasted the sea salt on my lips. Look how much details and how much description in there. Now, what do you think? Which is better from these two? The castle was beside the water, or I give you a whole image and a whole taste, even of the place itself, as if you were there yourself. All right, let's try a small exercise here. Look at this picture, and with your own words, and based on what we talked about before, try to write a small description based on the setting right now. Try to focus on the settings as we talked. Uh, think about the time of the year, think about the year, think about what you see, what you smell. Imagine yourself there. What can you hear? What can you taste? If there's anything tasting in there, was it cold? Was it warm? Think about all of this and write a small description for this image based on these settings. Take 5 minutes, take 10 minutes, and then you can ask the participants to share. Then we go into characters. Each story has characters. There is no way from big Hollywood movies into small, again, children books. Any story has a character. It has a main character and it has some other characters around the main characters. The character could be a thing, could be an animal, and could be a human being. It could be something completely else. But there is always a character shaped in this story and being um, focused on the whole story. Uh, these characters is there is something called characterization. This characterization is how you decide to show the personality of your story character. If you are talking about your friend going to the school, your friend is the character, you made the setting, and then you choose your friend to be a character. How are you characterizing your friend? Is he a good man? Is he bad in any way? What traits do you give? How can you describe him? What characteristics you put into this character? Of course, you go like into weaknesses, strength, and all this kind of stuff to create your own character. If you're talking about yourself, how do you characterize yourself? How do you see yourself? What traits do you put for your character in there? Think about what can help you actually in here, or you can also ask the participants. Think about your favorite book character or movie or TV character, any of these things. Your hero, as they say, right? How can you describe his or her appearance? What kind of personality does she or he have? What kinds of things does she or he likes? Make a list of the characters and traits for this character. This will help you to think about how characterization works into choosing your character. Then we go into the plot. The plot is everything in the story. There is this chart that any storyteller or anybody working with stories, from small stories to big stories, they go through this. The three parts of this story. Story starts normal, everything's amazing as usual. And then it started to go gradually into crisis. It goes to the climax where everything is so complicated and it starts to fall down again and everything falls into place. Sometimes the story starts, as you can see, to go up into the climax and it gets to crisis or rising action or in the middle of going to climax, and you think that, wow, everything, all the doors closed in front of this character or the main character, nothing gonna be solved and it's just horrible, how could they live? And then you get surprised that it goes even more and more, and here it built the whole tension for you. You want to know what's happening, how did all of this happen, what's going to happen afterwards, what's the questions that going to be answered, all this kind of stuff. So any story, it should go this way. Whatever story you will choose, whatever it is, from having difficulties with mathematics at school into finding environmental problems and shedding light on it, into not liking a specific food or whatever, and you wanted to write a story about it, it should go in this way. And that's what makes it a good story. It have to go into this interval. It goes normal, you're introducing the settings, you're introducing the characters, you're introducing the topic, what are you talking about, and then it go to the climax. What are we fighting here? What's the problems? What's happening? And then everything falls into a place. And this chart called the hero's journey, it's not necessarily will be used in storytelling, but it is something very good to know. Uh, this chart being used actually in studying activists, studying projects, making even writing projects right now in all the organizations that work on. They use this chart, which called the hero's journey. Any one of us is a hero somehow or another. Uh, we, and the story, it's not about being a hero that you saved somebody or an activist that gathered 10,000 people on the street to go somewhere. Uh, the story could be very small, the story could be very big, but they all somehow fall into the hero's journey theory. You get this whisper in your ear saying that I have to do something about this. There's some problem here. I have to do something about it. And then you start thinking about it. What can I do? How can I go on, I don't know, take an action and do these kind of things? But then you get a little bit of aid. You get maybe some friends around you. Yeah, that's a really good idea. Do it, man. You should do it. Go and change the world and all this kind of stuff. But then you start, you think you know what you're going to do. You think you know what is in there. Things are going well with the interval, remember? The interval? Things are going fine. You are defining your topic, you're defining your setting, you're defining everything. But then every this is here is the part called the known part. But there is the unknown part where you go into the darkness, as they say. You go into the part that you don't know what you're gonna do, or what is my activism or my story or whatever the thing I'm doing is going through, right? There is challenges and a lot of obstacles. It's going to be on the hero's journey in the first half of the unknown. They're going to get helpers, of course, and these helpers could be somebody that inspired you, or you found a little bit of spot of light that allows you to do some stuff, or you get an aid from somebody or something. And then things start to transform into, again, you go and you think that you know what you do, you think that things are being solved, but then you get another whisper and you go again. This is a very famous theory. It's called the hero's journey. I don't think, again, we're going to use it a lot in the storytelling, but it's good to know this theory because it helps us visualize the journey of any story, from small stories into big stories. Then we come to part section 4, or element number 4 of any story, which is the conflict. Um, and pay attention, it is different than the plot. The plot is the things that is happening and takes the story to the climax, but conflict is defining relations between the characters and other characters, maybe the characters and uh, as you can see, also types of conflict could be characters vs characters, characters vs nature, characters vs society, characters vs self. You need to define the conflict. What are you fighting for? If if I hate mathematics, it's character vs mathematics. If I'm keep taking mathematics as an example, I don't know why, but if I am doing an activism for environment, who I am fighting for, or who I'm fighting with as well. What's my conflict? Who's my conflict with? It's me against the society, or me against the government, or me against I don't know, a minister, but with himself because he's not representing our voice. What is the conflict in this? Whatever your story you're writing, it's important to show the conflict. Uh, this is actually a very good example. And after explaining all of this, I would suggest you actually get this game. It's a card game. It's called More Than One Story. I'm not sure, maybe some of you know it already. It's consisted of visual cards. So a lot of cards inside have a lot of graphics creatively put in together in a way that will create story. How this works is you actually distribute the cards for all the participants and have them go in a circle to tell or imagine what kind of story is on the card. There's the link here where you can buy it. It's not actually very expensive. It's cheap. It's really good to have. It's against any awkward social situation, I would say. Wherever you are, you can pack it with you. And if you get into an awkward situation where people don't know what to talk about over dinner or whatever, pick up your cards and distribute them, and let's see, because it tricks them. They don't only have to describe what's on the picture, but they have to relate it to themselves in a way. They have to see how is this related to them. And with this exercise, it's very important because it's going to take us again, remember, for the first warm up we did, when we asked 3 questions: why are you here, where you were 5 years ago, and where you are right now. It makes you feel, it makes you think, it makes you relate, it makes you look at yourself in where are you right now, notice things around you, and it puts you against or with your principles and values. Again, this is the link here. You can go buy it. And actually, a cheaper version of this you can make is finding pictures on the internet, right? And printing them down, cut the papers, and distribute them also to the participants. So you can use that instead of things. But this is ready for you. This is more creative inside the images and well done in here. Well, now we go into why storytelling is important. We know what is a story, we know the elements of a story, but why storytelling is important? Why do we need to use this storytelling techniques in our activism? Then it's important to think about why do we tell stories, to know why it is important. Do we want to feel alive? Do we want to stimulate our sense and emotions? Do we want to be part of a community? Do we want to help like define our identity? Are we trying to learn from our mistakes? Are we just wanted to share some stories with other people to build connections? Do we want to motivate, engage, mobilize some actions or some initiatives? Or do we want to educate, get some facts, data, put them all together in a nice story, and then you know why it is important, because then you can use this as a tool to achieve what you want. Do you know, actually there is a lot of stories being used for education back in the days. They use a lot of storytelling into data collections and data and facts announcing in the schools or in small communities as well. But that also takes us to what do you want your story to do? And of course, again, it's the same with what we talked about before. Why are you using this storytelling? What do you want it to do? Is it entertaining? Is it interacting, educating, or leading? If it's entertaining, you're focusing on the emotions, on the passions. If it's interacting, you're focusing both on you and the audience that you're talking. You're engaging them in the story, or you're including them into your story somehow. If it's education, um, you are somehow the authority because you are having knowledge put in together into a story and then you are telling them. And if it's leading, which mostly you guys gonna use because you are influencing an initiatives, you are influencing a social change. So these stories have messages that you want to communicate with the people and uh, push them somehow or inspire them or mobilize them to do something or to take an action. With this slide, that would be the end of part one of how to tell a story or what is a story. I will see you in the next part, which we go dive deeper into digital storytelling. See you.